Hello, everybody. Good morning. Can you hear me all right? It's really hard to be heard in these open sessions, so do be patient with us. And if you can't hear, I can actually speak louder. I can shout. Can you hear all right? No, you can't. We might even be able to put the volume up. Is that right? No. Okay. Well, I'll talk loud. How's that? Okay. Well, welcome to this session. My name is Charles Gould. I'm CEO of Brightwave. And this is a double session, actually, and it's a panel session. In a moment, I'll introduce our three speakers, but basically what we're going to do is we'll have presentations from each of them, and in between, I'll ask a couple of questions. And there's an opportunity for you, if you would like to also put your hand up and ask a question of each of the speakers. And then if we have time at the end, we'll review what's been said, and there'll be an opportunity for further questions. So our subject for this session is entitled, quite grandly, Cultures of Contribution, How to Motivate Engagement with Online Learning Communities. Now, I think we all recognise that we've always learnt socially, we've always learnt by asking questions and sharing ideas, usually with the nearest person sitting next to us. But of course, now that we're all using social media technology, and importantly now corporate IT departments are allowing people to use social media at work, we have a huge opportunity to tap into the potential of social media for work. But how can what happens instinctively, organically, and compellingly outside work using social media, Facebook and Instagram and the like, how can that be harnessed in order for us to learn at work? And that's the question that we're going to be exploring over the next hour. And we're going to focus on three key themes. So yes, we'll be talking about the technology. I mean, I think it's fair to say that many of us will be using 3 or 4 different social media platforms on a daily basis. So which one do we select to use to help us learn at work? We're also looking at the user experience and looking at what we do know about how people use social media in their everyday lives and how that can be harnessed and taken advantage of for learning at work. And then, perhaps most importantly, we'll look at the culture of how people form communities, learning communities online at work, and who needs to do what to grow those communities and to ensure that your social media venture doesn't end up being a sterile, static site. So let me introduce our 3 speakers. First up, we have Carl Hodler from LearnerLab, and Carl is an expert in user experience and user interface design. He's got a background in both corporate learning, but also in the world of games. Second, our very own Jonathan Archibald, who is head of technical development at Brightwave, and he's been responsible for the team behind our Tesselo product, our own social learning product. And then finally, we have Clare, who's head of learning technology for EMEA at KPMG, and he's going to be talking about the decisions and the considerations that they made in adopting their own social media platform and some of the experiences that they had. Good. Well, without further ado, I'll hand over to Carl.
Thank you, Charles. Can we hear this one, or is this one quieter? Is that okay? Good. Okay, I'm from LearnerLab, and we're an independent consultancy developing engagement strategies to help learning organisations and further education organisations as well better connect with audiences. I'm a content strategist specialising in user experience and game design, and I've been lucky enough to spend the last 7 years working with companies like the BBC, Sony PlayStation and Channel 4 designing content strategies for their consumer audiences. And I think the impact that the consumer digital space is having on our learning audiences is becoming harder to ignore. And we set up LearnerLab to help bridge this gap. So today, I want to spend about 10 minutes sort of looking to how we've got to a point where there's over 100 million how-to videos created by consumers on YouTube, and what we can learn from an organisation like Netflix to help us build more user-focused learning content. Last year there was a Gartner report that some of you may have seen. One of the headlines from that was half of large organisations will have an internal Facebook-like social network by 2015, but only 30% of those will be considered essential. The other headline from that was that 80% of social business efforts will not achieve their intended benefits through 2015. And to us, this felt a bit out of alignment with the success that social networking is having in our personal lives. And I think we'd all probably agree that social networking and the use of social media has felt pretty mainstream for a few years now. In fact, if we go back to 2011, pretty much every major TV show had a hashtag inviting their audience to go and join in the conversation on Twitter. But what's really interesting is the fact that social networking usage is growing still, and it's growing really, really fast. And it's driving the amount of adults in the UK who are using the internet every day. 73% of us use the internet every day now. And the reason behind this is that 50% of us, half of us, are using social networks. And social networks, and Facebook in particular, are really good at getting people to return very regularly. And not just that, but they're very efficient at turning people into active users. People who don't only share content, but they contribute to the conversations as well. And the reason that we've seen this growth in activity is that 72% of us now own smartphones. And last year, the sort of amount of social activity we do on our smartphones tripled. The reason that this is happening is because, as you probably know yourself, that we're looking for really short, snappy, engaging experiences to do on our mobile phones. And we know from the sort of games that we play that these really short, engaging experiences are the sort of things that are perfect for how we use our mobiles. And it turns out that social media delivers this sort of experience perfectly. And brands have realised that social media is really important for marketing, and they've realised this for some time. And, and thanks to their investment in delivering product and service information, audiences are now very proficient at using social networks to learn about a brand's products and services, to discover knowledge and to share that knowledge as well. But we're not only just discovering and sharing knowledge on social networks, but we're creating it as well. And there's a phenomenal amount of how-to content that's been uploaded to YouTube just by everyday people. And people are using the creation of content to create their online identities. And user-generated, crowdsourced learning on YouTube is attracting absolutely massive audiences. So with the general popularity and the increasing engagement of social networks and the amount of content that people are actually uploading themselves to these sites, why will so many social business efforts fail? And I think we know that the success of social media has obviously created a demand in business for creating consumer-orientated learning environments, but it also creates an expectation. So the problem that could cause 80% of people to not interact or engage with social business tools as we'd want is possibly because our audiences are naturally benchmarking corporate tools against the experiences they're having in their personal lives. So they're using Facebook, YouTube, and they love the simplicity, the usability, and the cross-platform compatibility of these tools. And they're getting a bit turned off when they're not getting this platinum service on business systems. And they're not really interested in the fact that a lot of these consumer tools have had nearly a decade of investment and refinement, but you can't really blame them for that. So, is it big budgets that are the secret to success? Well, they can certainly help. And to spend 18 months developing and refining the latest update from Netflix, that wouldn't have been a cheap exercise. But they only did that because they knew there was evidence that they would have a return on that investment. And that was proven last week when they actually added 4 million new users in their last quarter. And these are people who tried the demo and they've gone on to actually being a regular paying customer. But I think we also recognise that big budgets aren't the magic bullet to creating a successful, engaging site. Because we often see big IT projects going wrong. And when it comes to engagement issues, they often arise because the projects are designed around technical processes rather than the user needs. I think we'd all recognise a situation where we're a bit unclear where to begin, or there's too much copy to read, or not enough detail when you actually need to get into it, or really strict username and password criteria stop us reusing these servers. And healthcare.gov was plagued by these problems, but you do wonder whether they could have been designed out before launch if they'd had more of an approach like Netflix took. So, what exactly did Netflix do that healthcare.gov didn't? And how do the consumer networks sustain growth and engagement? And how can we use similar engagement strategies to ensure that our social business efforts won't fail in 2015? So I'm just very quickly going to run through 6 strategies that we use to help motivate engagement with online learning communities and learning content in general. So it's very easy to experience a disconnect with an audience. It's very easy to make assumptions about what your audience are looking for and building those into the system. And I think healthcare.gov demonstrated what can go wrong when you make those assumptions. Whereas Netflix proved what can go right when you get a deep understanding in your audience through surveys, focus groups, listening to conversations that your audience are having online. So, in order to create successful social networks for learning, it's important that we get a deeper understanding of our audiences. And we need to discover things like why and how people like to learn for work, what are their motivations and preferences, what are the sort of challenges they face, what they think is important, and also what conversations they're already having in the workplace and looking at how they can be moved into a digital space. And also understanding what channels and what devices and what social media your audience is using, both in their personal lives and in their working life as well. And using that to create not only a business case, but a strategy for launching the platform. Sorry, my slides for some reason are on automatic timer, so I'm kind of racing against it here. So, communicating a clear sense of purpose. Once you know what your purpose is, it's really important to give a sort of shared understanding of that to your community. So they understand what's in it for them, what's in it for their colleagues, and what's in it for the organisation as a whole. And I just pulled out this example of Facebook, just giving an idea of how they communicate their purpose to their audience. And you can see they beautifully communicate their mission statement in the update status. What's on your mind perfectly encapsulates what Facebook want their audience to do. And we should be putting our purpose at the forefront of our content and communication strategies, so our audience are in no doubt what the core purpose of their activity on the site should be. This also means I can't press the button to fast forward. There we go. So the other thing that is key is to not make your audience think too much when they're on the platform. So they know what their purpose is, but they need to be able to achieve that purpose with the minimum amount of effort. And you can see a lot of social networks use familiar conventions to stop their audiences from thinking too hard. and you need to innovate around these conventions. And with Tesla, we had a couple of unique features that we spent most of our time really getting right. And we wanted to make our audience feel confident using all the stuff that they recognise from other social media platforms. So they didn't really feel any friction when it came to using the unique features that they perhaps didn't recognise from other sites. Looking for engagement trends on other networks is a really cost-effective and good way of helping drive engagement on your own community. They can be a bit tricky to spot earlier on, but last year, for example, we saw Facebook and Twitter both start using kind of big hero images in people's timelines to drive engagement. And I think when you see two big organisations like that take on a very similar strategy in a short period of time, you can be pretty sure there's a lot of data gone into making that decision, and it's something that probably will help drive engagement on your own community. I've always really liked this comment about testing, because it is very true, but really testing should be done all the time, and it should be done with real users. Netflix probably used a lot of A/B testing to see if larger images were engaging their audience, but they also deployed test content to real users in their living rooms to see how people are behaving in their natural environments. Because you just cannot beat putting your content in front of the real people who are going to be using it and seeing how they behave. Netflix also analysed data, not only to see how their interface was working, but also to see what sort of content was being more popular. So they could streamline the amount of content they're delivering to their audiences and promote the stuff they know is being popular with segments to try and move that engagement around a larger section of their audience. Testing and evaluation will show where you're succeeding, and it will just generally help improve the audience experience. Twitter don't actually expect any of us to go onto the site every day and use it, and neither should we with our social experiences at work. Twitter use communications like system notifications, email notifications, and really quite engaging email messages that have strong calls to action to come back onto the network and start joining in conversations. They tell you stuff like what's trending, what's happening in your network, what other people are saying, and advising other people who you should be following. And we really need to make sure that we're using all our communication platforms to effectively keep our audiences returning and using our services frequently, but also making sure they're engaged and active on those services too. And lastly, getting inspiration from emerging trends. New technology can inspire new ways of thinking. I came across this app called MindMeld a few weeks ago. What it does is it listens to your conversation, and as you're talking, it gives you cues for interesting things that you can talk about based on your social media history and news items that you've looked at. And it kind of made me think, well, you know, how could something like this help kind of forward thinking on a platform like Tesla? And I thought if I was watching a video on Tesla, the Tin Can API could be feeding me reminders of content that I viewed previously, and perhaps giving me snippets of copy that I can share with my colleagues and bring other people into this piece of content, and just sort of spreading the engagement, and sort of help spread the engagement around the community. So it's always worth looking at emerging trends, because they do kind of help you think sideways about different things that you can bring into your own system to drive more engagement. So I think it's impossible for us to stop our audiences comparing the learning experiences they have with work with those that they have as consumers. But we can definitely use techniques that these services employ to better connect with our audiences. I've only really sort of skimmed through the surface of how we help organisations like Brightwave engage their audiences, but hopefully it's given you a taste of how using consumer-influenced engagement strategies can help make sure that you're in the 20% of organisations who are getting the best results from social media by 2015. And just some books that I've enjoyed over the last sort of 12 months. I particularly like Micro Interactions, the one on the end, which just goes into really geeky detail about things you probably wouldn't necessarily notice when you're using the internet, but actually just make you feel so much better about the technology that you're using. And a quick advert for our Twitter feed. Please follow us. We post loads of stuff all about engaging people and trends that happen in the consumer space and looking at how we can be influenced by those in the learning space. And if you don't get a chance to catch up with me after the panel, I'll be kind of hovering for a little while around the Brightwave stand here. But please, if we can help you out engaging audiences, do drop me a line. And thank you very much. Oh, also, I've got. If anyone didn't get any stickers at the beginning, come and see me. You can get your free pack of stickers at the end. That's probably the most important pitch.
Carl, you nearly robbed yourself of a round of applause there. Thanks, Carl. Just stay there if you wouldn't mind, just for a question or two. I've got one. We talked about the amount of content that users generate on these social media sites, huge amounts. And I wondered if there's anything we can learn for the way we generate and use content at work from how consumer sites use curation techniques.
Okay. Well, I think you saw from the slide earlier that Facebook in particular kind of measures, or one of the measurements they have for their ongoing success is the amount of active users they have on the network, so how many people are using it and putting stuff up on the site. But I think any of you who have attempted to try and find something that you posted a few weeks ago on Facebook will discover that it's just painfully difficult to actually find stuff. And these social networks that we've been looking at, they're very much designed around the moment. So it's just there for that day or that even hour that you're engaging with it, and then the content is archived, but in a way that you can't really access it. And that's very different to how we need to use social networks in the workplace, because it's important that we can find those previous conversations, we can find those links back to that amazing piece of content that you just about remember. So it becomes a resource, an ongoing resource that people can continually use and refer back to.
Yeah, it's an interesting example of how, although we can learn a lot from consumer social media, maybe they're not perfect in every respect for the way we learn at work.
You certainly just can't copy it.
No.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from the audience for Carl? I can hand the microphone over if anyone does. We have one.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could experience in basically integrating your social networks in business with all the other tools that we have. So we've got the LMS, we've got mobile, we've got other databases, we've got email, we've got all those kinds of things. How do we make the social side of it come to life and not feel like just another place to go?
I think it goes back to what the purpose of the social experience is. I think it's quite difficult for people to engage on a social network if they haven't really got a clear objective of what they're supposed to be getting out of it and putting into it as well. So I think, yes, it can be interesting to integrate with all your other services, but it really depends what your objectives are, what you're trying to achieve through your social network, as to whether that's something that is going to give you a benefit, or possibly just muddy the waters for your audience and make it a bit more difficult for them to understand what they're supposed to be doing.
I think your question is quite a nice segue into the next session, in fact, and I'm going to move on now, just in the interest of time. We hopefully will have some time for more questions. Right.